yeah, it can have any worse side effects than anything else.
Oh, for
know,
someone who does not believe in the all of the above approach to energy, for someone who is opposed to hydrocarbons as part of our fuel mix, the only other realistic alternative is nuclear, which is why it is even more astounding that nuclear energy is getting short shrift in this administration. We're about to go into the cap and trade debate, which also is the equivalent of a national energy tax. What will happen if it passes is everyone who produces energy will have to pay for the right to emit CO2 to the atmosphere. And the right to and the cost of emitting that CO2 in the atmosphere will be borne by everyone who consumes energy. It's not going to be borne by those who produce the energy. It will be borne by consumers. So every time you go and gas your car or turn on a light bulb, we as consumers will be paying higher bills.
How is it, and you may not, with only part of a year now under your belt, is there something you guys can do as the smallest delegation from any state when we get some of these things that come through that are just absolutely not in our best interest? The biggest thing that I can think of recently was that bill that was introduced by one of the representatives from New York about wilderness areas. I mean, we don't have the votes to stop it, but they don't have a clue what they're talking about. How do you deal with that as far as in Congress? Is it easy to get people to see your point of view or not?
It's tremendously frustrating. The member that you're speaking of, Representative Maloney, is from Midtown Manhattan, the densest population area in this country, and yet she's sponsoring a bill that would create more wilderness all over a vast area of the Intermountain West, much of which is in Wyoming. We're having a hearing on that bill on Tuesday of this week. Joel Bausman, who is a Sublette County Commissioner, will be there to testify on behalf of local governments throughout the Intermountain West about the impacts of legislation like that on local economies and people who use motorcraft for recreation, people who use snowmobiles for recreation, for hunters. These are major consequences to our economy and our culture and our way of life that absolutely cannot even be understood by Representative Maloney. It would be like you or me saying to the representatives in South Florida, we're going to tell you how to run the Everglades. It's simply unrealistic to reject the input of the people who live and work in an area while making legislation.
Do you think it's possible in the current climate in Washington to make the hard choices we have to make, and to say, look, yeah, these frivolous things we can't support them anymore. Yes, when it comes to these environmental causes, wouldn't you rather plan for our future rather than just get the instant gratification now of whatever the program happens to be? Is that even possible?
Well,
what's going on?
In these first 100 days, there has been a reaction, almost in panic mode, in drafting legislation and passing legislation. And that's why we've had these extraordinary expenditures, and including bills like the stimulus package that have provisions that no one has read, that no one knew was in there, and that have consequences, such as paying out the AIG bonuses, which was required in the stimulus package. And then subsequently, when the majority party found out that that was in there and that was causing public outrage, their reaction was to tax it to the tune of 90%, punishing the people who received the bonuses rather than recognizing Congress's own hasty and ill-conceived role in causing that to happen.
Can we slow things down in Washington? You got, what is it, 1,300 pages of the stimulus bill alone?
Absolutely. And
it takes more time to print it than they took to consider it.
Truly. And one of the things that former U.S. Treasury Secretary Nicholas Brady was advocating in a speech last weekend was that we have some independent commissions, especially one on the larger economic situation. So we're not taking these hastily ill-conceived pieces of legislation done in panic mode, done without bipartisan input, and that we take an independent commission, give them a period of time to come up with recommendations that are conceived in a more considered way, independently of Congress and the perceived need to react to public outcries.
Is there ever going to be a time when Washington, in your opinion, when Washington can step back and say, look, you can't have it both ways. Either we run everything, or you take some responsibility for yourselves and quit asking us to take care of you. I mean, you can't. They're two diametrically opposed positions. Do you think Washington's ever going to be able to take that stand, or is it going to be just gimme, 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 and people keep writing checks in Washington?
Well, the history of Washington in situations where that are out of the ordinary, such as we're in now with the economy, is to either do nothing or do way too much. And this Congress took the position of doing way too much. So I'm hopeful that with this first 100 days now past us, that more considered approaches can be taken using independent commissions, or that the leadership would finally begin to listen to both rank-and-file Democrats and any Republican who offers an alternative. And we did, as a Republican Party, offer alternatives.
But is anybody listening except for themselves? That's the question.
Well, the problem is we're targeting now Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi is not listening to anyone else. She's the Speaker of the House. She has a large majority within her ranks, and she's exercising a tremendous amount of control over what happens. I don't believe that that will change until November of 2010, when the voters will once again have an opportunity to go to the polls and critique whether she has taken this country in a direction that the American people approve of or disapprove of.
And then finally, the last big thing I want to talk about was the national response to this swine flu thing. And that is, and I know that's come through you guys as well, are we blowing this a little out of proportion? I mean, as far as the reaction to it nationally?
We do have some feedback that would indicate it has been blown out of proportion. However, sometimes the best way to head off a pandemic is to react quickly and loudly to the potential for a problem. Nevertheless, the best thing to do is exercise common sense. If you're sick, stay home so you don't spread it among your colleagues. If your children are sick, keep them home so they don't spread it among their classmates. Use hand sanitizer. Cover your mouth when you cough. These are the kinds of common sense things that need to occur. But I can tell you that on the metro in Washington, D.C., which I ride to work in the mornings, people are very reluctant to touch the doors, the bars, the seats. That's true in airplanes as well. This has put a tremendous fear in people, on top of an economic crisis and their own personal vulnerability with regard to their jobs. On top of that comes a big scare about personal health. The country has been just thrown into a tizzy.
But we have, in this country, thousands of deaths each year from the flu.
36,000 average each year.
And we've had one from this particular strain. And I personally think that my colleagues in the media are the cause for a lot of this panic. Because, you know, how come we don't talk about that every year? You know, 36,000 a year in this country alone perish from the flu that we have vaccines for.
Well, good point. I think the fact that it emerged so quickly in Mexico and began to spread around the world, and that it was a strain that had not previously shown any signs of effective vaccination capability is what caused some of the panic. But the fact of the matter is, people have taken common sense precautions, and it does seem to be under control, or at least flattening out and plateauing. I hope it continues to do so.
Now, what is the next step for us, either as Wyoming or as a nation, to get through this? I mean, we're seeing some turnarounds in the housing market and everything else in the current situation we're in, but is there a governmental answer? Is there a private industry answer? Is there an education answer that we can come up with? And who is going to be responsible for leading that charge? Is it going to have to be somebody from the private sector, or what are your feelings as far as you being able to work in Congress right now?
Well, I would argue that it is a three-pronged approach, that it is private sector businesses, it is the nonprofit sector, it is government. But I am so much more comfortable with government at the state level that understands the businesses within its borders, the economy within its borders, the culture and people, and the needs of the culture and people within their borders. So I believe that this is a very good time, having infused trillions of dollars into this economy, that the federal government listen to the governors, the legislators, the mayors, the private sector economists, Main Street banks as opposed to just investment banks, and get some feedback on what is working, what is not, and make some adjustments. I, of course, voted against every one of the major pieces of legislation that I talked about: the stimulus, the TARP, the 09 budget, the 010 budget. That being said, I also co-sponsored a stimulus package that would have cost $315 billion less than the one we passed, and created a third more jobs than are projected to be created here in Wyoming. So we're offering better alternatives as we go into this cap and trade debate, creating an enormous energy tax on the people of this country. I hope we'll keep in mind that they've already been hit with job vulnerability, that the Bush tax cuts are going to be repealed, and that those taxes are going to go back up, meaning every tax bracket's going to go back up, that we absolutely cannot impose an additional burden on the people of this country in the form of a national energy tax.
Okay, here's another one for you. You just mentioned it. This whole thing with our tax system and withholdings and stuff.